Hey everybody, it's Alex once again from the Remote Work Life podcast. Got a very special guest with me today, Bonnie Dilber, who is the lead recruiter, or recruiting lead with Zapier, one of my favorite tech remote businesses. So grateful to have Bonnie here with me today because, as I said, Zapier is a business I've been following for years. Not just following, I actually use the tech as well on my own blog and all that sort of stuff. So delighted to have Bonnie here. And Bonnie is very active, as you could probably imagine, being a recruitment leader in recruitment, but just not just that, but managing a team within Zapier. She also coaches. She also has her own newsletter. And if you want advice, tips about being hired, then Bonnie's certainly a great vessel of information. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her on TikTok. I'll leave some details in the show notes. She talks about, as I said, recruiting. She talks about workplace culture. She talks about equity in the workplace. So these are all things that are important for you to listen out for. So Bonnie, I just want to say thank you so much for giving you your time to join me today.
Thanks for the great intro.
Not a problem. So happy to have you here. And just really excited, as I said, not just because we're both in the world of recruitment, but because we also work with Zapier as well. Really excited to have you here. So
love meeting Zapier users.
yes, music for years and years. So tell me, Bonnie, tell me a bit about yourself. Just let's know a bit about you.
Yeah. So, you shared kind of the headlines. I work for Zapier. It's really an awesome place to work. I feel like even if I didn't work here, I'd probably talk it up a lot. It's an awesome product and an awesome employer. And I also love to support people around recruiting and, just like talk about workplace culture and all of those things that you shared. And outside of that stuff, I'm a mom. I have a 2.5-year-old. I feel like he's pretty much what gets the majority of my time outside of work. And I live in Washington, where I know not everyone loves the weather up here in the Pacific Northwest, but I love it. It makes me happy. I like the rain. I like that it never gets too hot. And so I spend a ton of time outdoors. And that sort of thing. And I'm also a former educator. Most of my career was in education. This is actually my first time working for a tech company. I think part of why I like to talk so much on social media is because that's kind of the educator, the teacher, and me wanting to share and coach and educate and inform others. And so, that is a little about me.
Yeah, I think it's a great combination, actually, that whole... I was looking, obviously, doing my research on you and... looking at your background, you're probably a bit modest, actually, because every role that you've been into, as far as I can see, you've been able to, how can I put it, sort of climb the ladder in terms of getting your promotions and work your way into senior roles. So if anybody had a kind of like a model career of how to sort of really build a career, if I'm looking at your profile, this is it. And
thank you.
It's really interesting because you've also got, you like you said, you worked in Teach for America, Oklahoma, where you gravitated to Vice President of Teacher Leadership Development, Vice President of Recruitment in Idea Public Schools, Senior Manager, again, you went back to Teach for America.
Yeah.
And then you had a period of time where you had your own business for a few years.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, okay, just talk us then through your career then, how you kind of gravitated through that.
Yeah, I think my career it's been a lot of fun. And one thing I will say is pretty much every opportunity I've had has really come as a result of like networking and people that I know. And so I just always tell people, just follow your opportunities, let people around you know what you're looking for. And I think that's kind of the best way to see what comes your way. But I started as a teacher and then through a program called Teach for America, which places people in kind of more under-resourced schools. And a friend of mine who was in recruiting said, hey, I think you should apply for this management role. I had never managed formally before, but he said, look, like you have a lot of the skills. And he just really sort of talked me up, both to me and to the hiring manager. And I ended up getting that opportunity. I went for it, even though I felt wholly unqualified. He convinced me that I was in fact like qualified, and could do the work. And I ended up getting the job. And so that was like my first move into management and out of the classroom. And it was leading a team that did teacher development. And then kind of, as you mentioned, worked my way up within that. I think the move to Oklahoma, I was living in Houston, Texas, a big city. Oklahoma is Tulsa, Oklahoma is a smaller city. Wasn't anywhere I thought I would ever live. But again, there was a leader within Teach for America who said, look, like, I think you could be great in this role. I think you would be a perfect match to the executive director. And let me just make that introduction and see what happens. I said, okay, fine. I remember I said, I'll do the meeting as a professional courtesy was the language I used. But I took that meeting anyway. I say, like, never say no to a potential opportunity. And I ended up like just really clicking, realizing that would be the perfect role for me, moved to Oklahoma, and it happened to kind of skyrocket. The region, I think, grew by 400% in the time I was there.
Wow.
I mean, grew really exponentially. And so that was where I was able to get those promotions. I was able to lead a team of about 40 people. And my manager Amy continues to be one of my closest friends and advocates, and has helped me like throughout my career as well. And so that's why I just say, like, never say no to a potential opportunity, just always explore. But yeah, I did that. And the thing that I saw along the way was the thing I loved most was building my teams. I loved hiring. I loved interviewing. I loved trying to convince other people to consider Oklahoma who didn't want to move there, who kind of had my same mentality and misconceptions about the community. And actually, I would move back to Oklahoma. If anyone's listening, definitely give it a try. Consider it. They have a great program to recruit remote workers, actually. So check out Tulsa Remote. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but what I loved most was the recruiting piece. And so I decided to pursue opportunities for a full-time recruiting role. Had no actual experience. I had only been a hiring manager, but again, a friend of mine in recruiting at Idea Public Schools said, hey, we have an opening. Let me introduce you to the CEO, and made that introduction, and got me like access to senior leadership there, and was able to, I guess, convince them that I had enough of a background in hiring and enough of the raw skills that I would be able to do that job. And again, it was a really rapid growth. Earlier when I said grew by 400%, I think I meant 4 times, but Idea was kind of about that same range. We more than tripled in size while I was there. So I had that opportunity there, and along the way, I would find myself sort of supporting others in similar roles. And so that was what led me to also kind of start the side business that for a time I did full time. And yeah, I've always kind of had side projects going on, but yeah, that was a little bit about that journey.
But yeah, it's good that I think a lot of people I speak to, because again, I'm in a similar sort of vein as you in terms of speaking to a lot of job seekers, a lot of people who are changing careers. I think people underestimate the power. They either underestimate the power of networking, or I think there's a bit of trepidation, a bit of fear on their part to do it. But it sounds like, and I think you sound a bit modest in the sense that you've been recommended for each job. But obviously, I don't think you've been recommended if the people who were recommending you didn't think you could do those jobs, right? And I think that's the key, is finding people who can vouch for you and know you. Because you said as well that one of the people who recommended you, you doubted yourself, but they thought that you could just do the role. Yeah. So it's really good. So were any of those roles that you did, were any of them remote roles, or were they in-office roles?
They were all, I would say, hybrid. I feel like that language didn't even exist, that concept of hybrid, I wasn't familiar with the term. They were all hybrid and really high travel. And so there were always times where we would work from home and times that we would work from the office. And Especially when I was at IDEA, I was traveling probably 2-3 weeks out of the month. And so a lot of time away from home, which at the time I loved. It was a lot of fun. I liked, living in a hotel, letting work pay for you to dine out every night. Like for where I was in my life, it was perfect. Zapier is my first full-time remote role. And there are some real differences in seeing, like, it's been eye-opening to see how a company that's remote first is kind of structured and the systems and supports in place versus companies where you are doing the mix and where sometimes it's more advantageous to be in office. Like, you can work from home, but you're at some sort of a disadvantage. Like, the meeting is all in person, so you can listen in, but you can't ask questions or engage. Or, the opinions that get solicited in a hybrid environment are often those that are in the office and have access to leadership. And maybe, you get to weigh in every now and then, but not, or you have to travel to be present. That sort of thing was something that I experienced in that hybrid environment. That being in a remote first environment, everything is structured so that everyone can engage regardless of time zone, regardless of location. And that is something that I've really appreciated here.
And so then, because a lot of people I've spoken to, the likes of Ben Congleton and Nick Francis, very much, the same with me. I mean, I understand what you're saying in terms of like remote first. Everybody's like, there's equity there. It's just,
yes,
everything's equitable within. But there is, I mean, I'm sure there are businesses out there that are hybrid and are doing it well. But
yeah,
I'm like you. It's like, and I've worked in hybrid situations as well, where you feel as though perhaps you're missing out on certain events and people who are in the office. So with that in mind, are you a complete convert in terms of like a remote first environment, or would you ever go back to the office?
I mean, never say never, because I don't know what the future holds for me, and I will prioritize being employed over, over not being employed. And so perhaps if I had to, but I will definitely prioritize remote opportunities. I think it just works well for where I am in my life. Again, now I have a child, so travel would be really hard. And the idea of maybe commuting, even if it's just half an hour a day, that's time that you could be spending, with your family or on just other things that probably feel more important. And so I like that work can also, with the remote environment, especially the way it's structured at Zapier, where there's a lot of flexibility around when you're working. I can just step away and go run to Target if I need something, if I need to grab headphones, as I did this morning. I don't have to let anyone know. Nobody is going to say, wow, we noticed Bonnie was away for 20 minutes, that sort of thing. Whereas I think in an office environment, those things just get amplified. And so it feels like there's less flexibility there. Yeah. And so I love remote work, but for the right opportunity, I would consider maybe a hybrid situation. But
sure.
Yeah.
No, I always tell these stories because I'm like you. I'm a family man. Got 3 kids, and there was a point where I always tell this. I don't know if this ends up in every single podcast I talk about, but I always talk about my children. The fact that remote work, like, it gives you that family time that you don't appreciate it until you're actually in it. Because there was a point where I went back into the office, having worked remotely for a number of years, like full-time remote. And when I was sitting at my office desk, I felt that I was really missing out. I felt quite sad that I was, sat at my desk, as much as I knew I had to work, but at the same time, all the things that I probably took for granted, like taking my kids to school, I could no longer do. And that was only then that I realized how much of an impact remote work can not just have on your career, but just your whole life,
Yeah.
So
it allows like work to fit into your life instead of the other way around.
Yeah, and it allows you as well, because I mean, like I said, you've got that continuity in your career in terms of your career development, and you had some great roles. You're in another great role in another great business. You're a mom, all of that sort of stuff. It just allows things that normal jobs don't allow you to do. But
exactly.
One burning question I have, and I know a lot of the reason I want to ask this is because there are people who because there's obviously remote roles are highly competitive, especially some of the best companies like Zapier. How did you go about, I think you probably know the answer to this, but how did you go about getting your role?
Yeah. So I had a really hard time. I decided, so my whole career, like I said, was education and nonprofits. And it's hard to get out of that space. It's hard to get into, into a space like tech. So I went through a number of hiring processes before I first started sort of exploring roles in tech a few years ago. And every single time that I got kind of into an interview process, it was always a referral. I would find a job and then find someone in my network and ask them to refer me. And did kind of get to a finalist stage. And there was one role that I lost out to an internal candidate. It was at Meta, and it was a great experience. The hiring experience there was great. The hiring manager was wonderful. The person who referred me was great. And then they were really honest, like if we had a second role, and it didn't work out. And I, felt like I was just kind of losing out to people who had been in that space. And then I took a break and was kind of going through the process. And one thing I did, which maybe it's a little bit maybe of a controversial thing, but I decided to apply for roles that were sort of below my level. So I actually came into Zapier as a senior recruiter. I was promoted 6 weeks later back into a management role. But I did that because I felt that, one, it would open up the number of opportunities. There's a lot more individual contributor roles than there are management roles. And coming in with some sort of like a deficit in my experience in the eyes of, a hiring manager, I think if you can recruit in a nonprofit where compensation is lower, it's a lot harder than recruiting in tech where I can offer people lots of money and remote opportunities. So I actually don't think there was a real deficit in skill, but there was that perception for hiring managers. And so I decided to sort of be more flexible and just focus on, as long as my compensation can stay kind of equivalent, I don't care about my title. And that opened up a lot more opportunities, and I got a lot more interviews once I did that. And so that's just one thing I would encourage people if you're making a career pivot. If you do have some flexibility or can decide what your priorities are, for me, it was remote work and compensation over title or, what exactly I was going to be doing. And so that opened up things, and that helped me identify a role at Zapier. And another thing was I happened to know the chief people officer loosely, not very well, but he posted on LinkedIn about being a month into his new job at Zapier and loving it. And I didn't really know Zapier very well, but did some quick research, messaged him and said, hey, I just saw your post and saw this role. I'm applying. I have no idea what role that played. If he asked the, recruiting manager, hey, check this person out, I have no idea. But I always recommend that if you're applying and you find people in your network at a company, go ahead and contact that person and let them know, because they might put in a plug for you in some way. And so anyway, I that was how I found out about Zapier, and where I kind of opened myself up to any level of role, which then made it easier for me to get into the application process. Yeah.
And did you then, Bonnie, because one thing I found when I was interviewed for a remote role, there are kind of different sort of questions that are asked, apart from the technical questions.
Yeah.
Did you, I suppose we could play this two ways. Did you find that yourself in your interview process? And is that something that when you're hiring people, you sort of interrogate as well?
That's a good question. I think I think with remote work, there are going to be more questions around your working style and how you communicate, how you collaborate with others, because it is just different when a lot of it is done in writing, when you are working asynchronously. It's a lot, you can't just watch someone next to you do something and learn from them. You have to learn it through a computer screen or through reading and internalizing. And so I think both on the hiring side, we do ask questions to sort of make sure someone's equipped with the skills to navigate this environment successfully. And it helps if they've worked in maybe a hybrid situation, but, we'll ask them about how they navigate like conflict and things like that. But a lot of them are questions you might see in other hiring processes, but we definitely kind of look for how they're going to be able to navigate this specific work environment. And I always tell people, I don't think your first job should be a remote job if you can find other opportunities. I think it's good to learn how to navigate office life, how to navigate office politics, those sorts of things. And then, bring that foundation into a remote environment once you're a little more mature in your career. And, I also just think about how much of my adult social life was rooted in my office community. And I don't really see my colleagues in person very much. Even ones that live in the area, we have a monthly lunch. I usually don't go just because I don't remember to plan for it. And so I think when you're a little more established, it's easier because you're not relying on work to be your social network and your community. You're relying on work to be your job, and then you're getting the rest of that stuff from other parts of your life. So that last part wasn't quite your question, but it's just like a reflection I have that I think is important for people to think about.
No, it is. And I think that's something that's a lot of interviews that I've held with other remote leaders. They've said very similar things to you in terms of, there is a certain level of learning required before you should dive into it, especially like a senior remote role, because there's so many nuances to remote work that you don't experience, or maybe you just take for granted, like you said, next to somebody and learning in that way, whereas you have to be more deliberate about other certain things when you're working remotely.
Yeah.
And when you were talking, you talked briefly just before about the transition from the sector that you were in previously, and you've gone straight into the tech sector, which again, there is a perception, there is a big challenge to get to sort of move from that sector to the tech sector. How did you do it? How did you do that?
Yeah. So one thing I'll share is when I was leaving IDEA, I did apply to a couple of jobs in tech, and none of them ended up working out. And I specifically tried to get back to Teach for America because a lot of tech companies, Teach for America's recruitment team had a really strong reputation. There were a number of tech companies that would come and just basically hire. We were like a pipeline into big, FAANG tech companies. And so I knew that. And that was one of the reasons that I actually decided I wanted to go and work on Teach for America's recruiting team, because I felt like it would level up my skill set and my credibility and kind of give me access to those networks that where I might then be able to more easily transition into tech. That is advice I always give people. If you're trying to make a career pivot, maybe think a few steps out. Like, it may not work directly from where you are. If you are a classroom teacher today, you're probably not going to go and become a marketing manager at a tech company tomorrow, but maybe you can get a marketing role at a school district and then move into a marketing role in tech. Or maybe you can get, a very entry-level coordinator role at a tech company and then move into, that sort of thing. So I think it's important to sort of think a few steps ahead. And for me, part of my desire to go into a talent acquisition role with Teach for America was that I knew that was a good way to get into some of the companies that I wanted to work for.
Right. I think you've landed in one of the top tech companies around.
I think so. I love it. Yeah.
And like I said, I love Zapier. I use it. I don't do coding, even little bits of coding. So Zapier has really helped me out with my WordPress blog and with all my other stuff. Tell us, for those who haven't for those who haven't heard of Zapier, just tell us a bit more about Zapier.
Yeah, I'm in that camp of people who hadn't really heard of it before I started applying here, but we are a company that's committed to making automation work for everyone. And so we, no code, as you mentioned, we want to make tools that help people automate their processes and systems. And to me, there is a big equity component in a tool like this, a product like this. You can even have a free account and get a good amount done for your job, but really accessible price point. And there are so many people who are able to build, small companies, start their own business just using Zapier. Pretty much anyone in sort of the entrepreneur community, which I have a small one around, everyone uses Zapier. I feel like it is like the one constant where everyone uses Zapier because we help you integrate lots of the different tools and products you might use. You're using a CRM and you have your blog and you want to push your content out in lots of places, or you have a lot of leads coming in through Facebook and you want to just like automatically, get content pushed out to them. People use Zapier to do that. And it doesn't really matter what systems or tools you're using. We likely integrate with it and can help you like make those connections. So it's all sort of running in the background and allows like one person or a small team of people to just get a lot more done without needing to have very many technical skills. I've been bragging that it helps me feel like so techie and advanced.
Yes.
But I don't have any great like technical knowledge. I built a chatbot recently using a couple of them using.
Okay.
Yeah. And it makes me feel very cool that I have a chatbot that I could send people that's using, AI and Zapier. And yeah, I think it's like a really fantastic tool for small businesses. I mean, we have huge enterprise companies using it as well, but I think if anyone's starting a small business, like this has to be in your tech stack.
Definitely. And for me, like you, it was like made me look really. I built a blog around Zapier and some of the workflows. And I
cool.
Alex, how did you do that? I didn't think you could code. I was like, no, I can't code, but I just did a few things in the background and use Zapier here and there to put things together. So tell Wade I said thank you for that. But no, I love Zapier. And for you as well, you mentioned asynchronous. Is that across the business then? Is everybody async? How did you make that? How did you find that transition then? And how has it impacted you?
Yeah. I mean, the majority of the business is in sort of like US time zones, anywhere from kind of Eastern to Pacific, but maybe I don't have great statistics. So I won't try to throw out a number, but maybe 20-30% of the company is outside of those time zones. Maybe more on the 20% side. I should know this, but anyway, there is a small number, and a lot of it is we use Slack. I would say that's like our biggest collaboration tool. And then different teams we have Coda as well. And a lot of things are you just kind of plan ahead, knowing that a feedback cycle, you can't just ask for feedback by end of day. You need to think about kind of a 48-hour window, which will kind of cover people in any time zone and that sort of thing. And so I think it requires a little bit of planning. We also encourage people to sort of build publicly to an extent. So don't wait until something's kind of at the finish line and you now need everyone's like feedback on it. But if you're sort of doing it publicly and sharing along the way with people, then they can hop in and give feedback on their own time. You can schedule out time for if you want live, feedback or interaction around something. Just scheduling that in advance. I think a lot of it doesn't feel drastically different from working around other people's schedules. There are a few time zones that can be hard to work with. Very occasionally, I'll get, flexible and do something at 7 a.m. to accommodate someone who's 12 hours ahead of me or that sort of thing. And they're also having to be flexible, do something at 7 p.m. their time, that sort of thing. But it's pretty rare that we're needing to do that. And for the most part, we try to give people opportunities to give feedback or engage in a few different ways. For example, I'll usually offer a written option and then also say, hey, if you'd rather record a Loom video and just talk through, that's fine too. Or, here's a space where we can all hop on and discuss the topic, that sort of thing. So giving a couple of options can help, I think as well, so that people can figure out like how to engage in a way that suits them and their learning style and their work schedule.
And I guess as a parent, because I work mostly synchronously in my current role, but I've done async as well in the past, and it's a beautiful thing. That's the only thing I can use to describe it, in the sense that you can manage your time to, like you said, plan ahead, but manage the time. How has that impacted you and your role as a parent as well? How has it impacted you?
So my team, when I first started, would kind of tease me of like, do you just not stop working? Because I would send Slack messages at 5 a.m. my time. And it wasn't that I was working that whole time. It's that I would get some work done and then I would step away and have a little bit of time where I could, have some time with my son, have breakfast, that sort of thing. And then would come back to work. And then I would often kind of wrap up early and be done with work at 3. And if I had some stuff to do, I could wrap it up like in the evening. And for me, that really works. And so I love having that like flexibility to most of our meetings are sort of scheduled right in the middle of the day, in the period that overlaps most, at least all of our US based time zones. And then outside of that, there is like flexibility to schedule things, to step away, and then you can kind of get stuff done when it works for you. And so I love that. It helps me be present. It helps me if I have a childcare, something with childcare fall through or a doctor appointment. I don't have to feel terrible. I don't have to rearrange my whole schedule.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things are designed to accommodate that kind of flexible schedule. And a lot of things like we have a weekly all company hangout and it's always recorded. And so it's just known, hey, if you can't join, you can just watch the recording. There's not this like hard, firm expectation. Everyone has to accommodate being there. So I think that's just even things like that I really appreciate because they allow people to continue to have that flexibility in their life without feeling guilty if they're not online, like for the workday.
And I think there's still a lot of, so obviously there's different sort of spectrums, different flavors of remote work. But I think asynchronous work, I still think there's quite a lot of people who can't quite wrap their head around.
Yeah.
You can sort of create a multi-million-dollar business around working asynchronously, and people can actually take their kids to school and people can actually do other things around work and still have a productive work day. There's still, but Zapier is managing to do it. Zapier and others are managing to do it. They're at the forefront of actually doing it, aren't they, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was really amazed that, we're, I think 10 years old, maybe 11, and have always been remote, just like found it to be that way. And I didn't even realize like companies were doing that 10 years ago, that was an option. I knew there might be individuals who worked remotely, but again, in my mind, that meant you were traveling all the time to go be present in the office and that sort of thing. And that was what I was used to. And so I think to see a company that actually from the start sort of evolved and grew that way, I think there's so many benefits to it. And I think there's also a big equity component that doesn't get talked about enough because a lot of traditional high-paying tech jobs kind of require that you are in San Francisco or New York. You're in these really expensive cities that a lot of people can't afford to live in. Or if you have a family you can't afford to live in, or where living in those places, you're choosing between, home ownership and your job, that sort of thing. And remote work means, I live outside of the city. I'm, 30, 45 minute drive, like if I want to go get into the, downtown. And I love it. I have, a nice size house, live in a nice area, but I would hate it if I had to commute into the city every single day. That would really have a negative impact on my quality of life. And we would be, it was just our living circumstances would be quite different. And so I like that I don't have to make that choice. And I know that there's other people who, at least for me, I could go to the city if I needed to. I have neighbors that do drive in every day, even though I don't. But there's, people 2 hours, 3 hours from any sort of major business where the only option to have this kind of a job is working remote. And so and then that expands globally as well. And I know there's lots of people working for us who are in countries where there just may not be an option for them or the same level of options, if not for remote work. And so that's something that I really love.
And again, another similarity with you and other leaders in remote work is that equity is at the core of, it's much more than work, isn't it? Equity is at the core of what you stand for, not just your work, but what you stand for. And some of the people that I coach and have coached have been, for example, moms going back into the workplace and are struggling to find work in tech, outside of tech, that allows them to, they want to be with their children.
Yeah.
Not just mums, but dads as well. Men and women who want me as well. So, and I think that's what I love about the people who've established and remote businesses and remote professionals like yourself, is that the thought process around careers development and life is just sort of, there's a marriage between those two things. But what I'm intrigued to know, where did your sort of passion for equity and where did that come from? Where did that stem from for you?
Yeah, good question. It's interesting because I really do go back to like my childhood, and so my family were Turkish and moved to the US when I was 5. And so I kind of, went through the experience of learning the language while going to kindergarten, and having like moments where they questioned if I should move on to the next level because I just refused to talk and that sort of thing. And so they weren't sure that I was learning or if I had special needs, that sort of thing. And my mom had the privilege of knowing how to kind of navigate that and advocate with the school system to make sure that they understood that this was just kind of a normal part of language development and being a language learner, and kind of, advocate for me to kind of continue moving ahead and that sort of thing. And I went to 4 different elementary schools before 6th grade. And they were very different. I went to one that was in a very kind of under-resourced area. And I remember, and then I moved from that to a more sort of very kind of middle-class area. And I remember even at that age, like noticing how different the resources were, and, things like just having my own copy of a textbook versus sharing, and like things like that. And so even at that young age, I think I learned really quickly, like, just how much inequity was around us, and how much sort of like where you lived made a difference. And I studied sociology in college and women's studies, so spent a lot of that time as well learning about inequity in our society and kind of how it plays out. And then I went in to teach for America. A lot of that stuff kind of motivated me there. Again, I saw a lot of inequity, I experienced it firsthand. And so a lot of my career has just like been in that space. And I think coming into tech, I had this feeling of like, I'm selling out because I'm leaving this more mission-driven work. And so that was really, I think, a lens that I tried to hold on to, is like, how do I, one, make sure I'm working for a company that does value equity, and I felt that here, but also that where I can use my role to, like, try to direct equity, and where hiring does that, right? Like, who gets to learn about your company. And that's also part of why I'm so active and vocal on like LinkedIn and about these issues in particular, because I think there's a lot of things that I learned going to college, or I learned from my parents and other people do, that some people don't, about how to job search or how to network and that sort of thing. And so for me, being able to share those tips with people and help them understand how to do those things that they may not have learned is really important to me.
And I think as well, again, being in recruitment as well, having spent a lot of time in recruitment, we need people like you, because it's like you said, there's certain things that you and I take for granted in terms of the networking side of things and how to do it and why to do it and who to do it with. But those things that perhaps you and I can do pretty much easily are things that can really make a difference, can't they? If it's the network that you build, not just your your social networks, but your professional networks.
Yep.
When my eldest daughter, she's at university now.
Oh wow!
I'm saying to her, build your network from there, sort of thing. And the people that you're sort of friends with at uni potentially could be a CEO of a company, or there could be a manager of a company. So it's starts from starts from very, the grassroots.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't told that, maybe it would have taken a bit longer to learn. Maybe if you were an advocate online, maybe people don't realize that. So it's really important that your work's so special and so important. So please continue, But that, in terms of your career, because as I said, you've been able to, when I look back on your career, you've been able to advance. It's going in an upward trajectory, certainly. When you sort of, if you imagine I suppose your career, you think about it as almost like a staircase. How far would you say you're up that staircase?
So it's interesting because I think I would say I kind of came down a step coming into tech, but there's some intentionality to that, and part of that was like, again, wanting to sort of make that kind of career pivot and being open to stepping down. But the other is, and I think people really need to do this reflection for themselves, is I like to be closer to the work, and I don't like as much of the politicking and the kind of pure strategy and spending all your time at this like higher level cross-functional collaboration. I had to do that in previous roles, and I did not enjoy that as much as I enjoy being more engaged with the execution. And so that actually also led me to have that realization where, I reported into a chief at a 6,000 person organization previously, and I didn't like being at that level as much as I enjoy, being in somewhere where it's a little bit smaller and a little bit more, where again, I'm a little bit closer to the work that's happening on the ground and have a little bit more of a marriage of tactical and strategic work. And I think it's important for people to reflect on that for themselves, because I do think there's often encouragement to climb the ladder, get a bigger title. And I don't always think that that's like the right move for everyone if that's also not what brings you joy or makes going to work fun for you. And so anyway, that's like my reflection there.
Yes.
And I don't know in terms of the future. I've gotten very into the content creation side of things, and maybe in the future that'll be a path of wanting to kind of go deeper into building systems or coaching, that sort of thing. I don't know if I'd want to do that full time. I have done kind of full time consulting work, and that was a lot of fun. So maybe I could go that path, but I like to kind of stay flexible. But I realized a long time ago that I don't aspire to a C-suite role.
Got it.
I just don't know that that's like where my strengths or where my joy comes from personally. And I think it's important for everyone to do that reflection and decide for themselves.
And I think what I see your career is like, you're in a position now where you could, if you did decide to do that, you could go that way, or you could go that way. And so it's almost like, and you mentioned you took a step back, but I think sometimes sometimes you take a step back to sort of go forward, sort of thing. And I think you're in a great position to sort of take. Yeah,
I think there's options. And I always tell people, like, careers are really long and you can change your mind whenever you want. And so, it could be that my experience at kind of that level and at that scale wasn't right for me, but perhaps that level of role would be right at a different scale. Or it could be that 3 years from now, that will be something that I would really enjoy. And so I think a friend of mine once, or a former colleague, used to always say, reserve the right to change your mind. And I hold on to that because I think it's really important. I think a lot of times we say something and feel like that has to be what we think forever. And that's just not true. That can be what makes sense right now. And then as we learn more, gather more, build new skills, talk to different people, what we think can change and evolve. And that's okay.
Absolutely. And talking about evolution and change and the future, what are you excited about for the future, or what's ahead?
At Zapier specifically, or just more broadly for me? Yeah.
Broadly for you, yeah.
Yeah. I am, what am I really excited about? I'm really excited about, from a work perspective, I'm really excited about some of the programs that we're building right now. We're really working on some of like our internal mobility. And I love seeing people grow within a company. And I love seeing people move across teams and things like that. And just, seeing people have these like varied career trajectories. I think it can be really hard to do that for people when you move companies. And so the more that companies internally can create those sorts of pathways for people. So anyway, that's something that I'm working on right now that I get really excited about because, again, I think it ties to giving people options in their career. And if we can do that for them here, that's going to unlock lots of doors and opportunities for them. We currently we're piloting a secondment program where a lot of members of our recruiting team are currently working on projects with other teams. And it's been great just seeing the skills that team members are developing in, things like employer branding, and I have a team member working on sales enablement. And I'm just thinking like, wow, this is going to unlock a whole other career pathway for you. If you want it, you may not, but this is going to open doors for you. And so I love getting to kind of be a part of building those sorts of programs. And that, is something I'm pretty excited about here. And I'm working on a couple of different projects just around trying to support job seekers. So it's sort of like my, I guess, passion project. Mm-hmm. So working with a friend on kind of toolkits that we might be able to share specifically with educators who are looking to transition, just because that's like my background and it is a hard transition to make. And so things like that, again, that can just sort of support people to have the career journey that they want and give them the tools that they need to do that. That's the stuff I get excited about.
Sounds great. And I mean, I have so many more questions what I'd love to ask, but I know you've probably got a busy day ahead. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but it's been really insightful. As I said, really admire how you built your career. As I said, love what Zapier is doing. And
thank you.
We'll be definitely keeping an eye on your progress with Zapier and with your other projects as well.
Much.
Share some details in the show notes. But Bonnie, just wanted to say thank you so much, and all the best for the future with your family and with Zapier.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good.